On today's episode, I spoke with Alessandro Bogliari about getting high ROI out of influencer marketing campaigns. Alessandro is the CEO of the Influencer Marketing Factory, and he's an expert in all things social commerce. So, in this episode, we talked about the current state of influencer marketing for brands, how to make live stream shopping work for you, and the balance to strike between big influencers and micro influencers, and a lot more. So, let's dive right into the episode. So, before we get into specifics about influencer marketing or social commerce or any of these interesting topics here today, just want to kind of set the foundation for who you are, let the audience get to know you a little bit. So if you wouldn't mind, could you just walk through kind of the bullet points of your career and what's led you to what you're working on now?
Yeah, absolutely. Alessandro from Italy, like as you easily can see and hear from my accent, I lived there for, majority of my life. And then after, leaving Milan, I went to Copenhagen in Denmark, where I studied for my master's degree. And I got into the world of influencer marketing. This was like 8, 9 years ago, more or less. After that, I basically was like, okay, Copenhagen is cool, but it's a bit too cold for me. And so I moved to Miami. That is the opposite of Copenhagen, where I co-founded, the Influencer Marketing Factory. That is my influencer marketing agency. And now I live in New York City. So I changed quite a few cities, depending also on the weather, I would say sometimes. And no, jokes apart, just to meet a few more people and understanding about cultures. I always wanted to move to the US. So now I've been living in the US around 7 years.
And why influencer marketing? What was it that kind of hooked you into that specific area of marketing?
Basically, when I was in Copenhagen, I was working as a growth hacker or a growth marketer, this terminology used. And I was working with this other person and we were looking at, new ways, new things, what was next, right? In the social media, internet type of thing. And we started realizing that, influencer marketing was quite, interesting. There was like no data about it, no analysis, no nothing. It was this wild west of people that used to have a hobby. Before it was blogging, and then it became Instagram, and then for some people Pinterest, and then after that, Vine and YouTube and so on. And so what I did is that basically when I was there, I had to write a thesis about something. And so I was like, wait, I already started working into this industry. I had to write a thesis about influencer marketing. So put them together. And then at that time, I created this algorithm to calculate how much to pay influencers on Instagram. I was the first, I think, time that someone was looking into data and create a software or a tool, a little algorithm behind that to tell you, okay, yeah, it's a nice thing, but how much should I pay? What is the ROI that I can expect and so on. So I was like, this is nice, but let's try to make something even more serious about this. And let's take data, let's take analysis, let's take everything possible. Let's put everything together in this algorithm that gives you an outcome to give even more legitimacy to the influencer marketing. Because again, at the time it was very wild west. It still is sometimes, but that's basically how I started. I was like, this is interesting. I'm already working on the informational side of influencer marketing. I took out the thesis. Let me put them together. And then fast forward when I moved to Miami, I was like, this is still what I like to do. I'm still into the industry. Let me, create an agency. And that's what I did.
I think you did a good job of kind of talking through what influencer marketing looked like when you first started, but I'm curious how that's different today. What do you kind of see as the current state of influencer marketing?
It's very different, many things. First of all, before when you were talking with brands, up until I would say 7 years ago, 6 years ago, the question was, what is influencer marketing? While now it's, what is the ROI that you can bring me, right? Before it was, tell me the difference between, or like, tell me the type of influencers that you can, work with. And these days it's like, oh, are we sure that the tracking pixel for each, influencer has their own, UTM parameters, yada, yada, yada. So we went from something that is just like a nice to have to a must have. And in terms of also budgets, we have been seeing like, shift of overall budgets from traditional media to influencer marketing. So again, before it was maybe a small percentage, this percentage has been growing. So the overall influencer marketing economy is growing. Brands are understanding much more why it is important. And there is more education. There is more transparency, I'd say. There is more knowledge about what it is. And brands are understanding that, again, you have to do it. If you don't adapt using influencer marketing these days, you're kind of lost.
I'm sure you worked with so many different industries,
Mhm.
types of companies with influencer marketing, so you've kind of seen
Yeah.
the wide range of possibilities. But if a brand comes to you and they haven't really tried it yet, and they're very unsure and unclear on how influencer marketing can work for them, how they're going to get an ROI out of it, what are some of the foundational strategies that you just keep coming back to that you know will work for most brands?
So first of all, as a brand, I would say, just go on each social media. I spend enough time to understand each community, each trends, each medium. Not because you know about Instagram means that you're gonna know about YouTube. That doesn't mean you're gonna know about Pinterest or Snap or TikTok, right? So first of all, I know this it sounds like common sense. Believe me, how many times I heard about people that talk about things that because they heard a friend of mine told me that TikTok is not the place for me. Someone told me like, yeah, YouTube, I don't know, like blah blah blah. Just go yourself. Spend time, understand what works, what doesn't, the do's and don'ts. Listen to watch both organic videos, promoted videos. Do your own homework to understand, and without having bias, right? Yourself, just go in there and be like, I really like them. That is the first step. The second is, no matter what, just go and test out things. You can start with a small budget these days, to be honest, prices are skyrocketing when it comes to influencers. So it's more difficult these days to spend just $1,000 and get something out of it. To be honest, but you can still test things yourself. You can use certain platforms to understand the demographics, data, anything else, other insightful things that might help you understand which influencers to find. Work with them on the storytelling, on the narrative, on everything, because they are the ones that know better than you their audience, right? Therefore, just be welcoming, understand that they know the do's and don'ts, what works, what doesn't. So again, start with a smaller budget. Start with maybe with a couple of social media instead of trying to do with 6 different social media at the same time. Test out things and then track everything. That is crucial. Have everything under control in terms of how much you're spending for each influencer, how much you're bringing on the table, and you can go as much granular as you want. There are so many third-party tools these days that you can use to understand exactly what is the ROI of that campaign. So just start, just do it. Smaller budget, you can do it, but you have to track everything. If you don't track things properly, as any other branch of marketing, basically it's a waste of money.
Yeah, and given your data, since you've been doing this for quite a while now, what are some of the benchmarks when you're talking about tracking everything? What are the metrics that matter most when you're just getting started? And what are maybe some of the benchmarks that companies should be looking to hit?
Yeah, it really depends, right? By the industry they're in, location, and especially what is the goal of the campaign, right? If we're looking at brand awareness, you can always look at things such as, CPM, of the campaign could be also CPC, because if you don't hear necessarily conversions, but you will still want to send potentially people to a landing page just for informational content, those are the ones that are going to be interesting for you. But again, those, it can vary a lot, to be honest. The CPM, you cannot you cannot compare, CPM between, let's say, YouTube and TikTok. Sometimes I see these correlations like it's, apples and pears. You cannot, the CPM of those models is totally different, but it's still important to, again, look at everything. You can more or less forecast things. Like what we do all the time that we look at influencers, we study their previous 6 months. And we're able to see, we build our own system to understand what is the average likes and comments, all the vanity metrics. They're still very important because if you see a decline, most probably that's what is going to happen, right, in the next video. It's also important do not look only at the organic video that they post. Look at what happens anytime that they post a promoted video, right? Or a promoted story or anything like that. How do they perform? And we also do that. We analyze, we have all our spreadsheets where we analyze organic content versus paid content. And when that is promoted, we also want to see more or less what to expect. If usually, let's say their engagement rate is 5, okay, organically speaking, and then anytime that they do an advertising with 0.5, and then it's constant, then we know that we have to look into that, take that in consideration. Therefore, instead of paying for their followers numbers or engagement, we look at engagement also based on their performance on paid. So that is for the awareness. And then when it comes to conversion based, depending on what you have, we work with a lot of apps. Therefore, the cost per install, it's going to be absolutely a way important metric. And these days, using, tools like Apps Flyer, Singular.net, any of these third party, like apps tracking tools, you can easily go so granular that you can see exactly how many downloads a specific influencer brought you in. You can do that thanks to pixels, UTM parameters on the URL, promo codes, whatever. So no matter if it is brand awareness or conversion, you can go so much granular these days. And the next time you're going to run a campaign out of, let's say, 10 influencers that you used, go and select the 3 ones that brought you the most and use them on the long-term partnerships.
Yeah, that makes sense. And this question is kind of piggybacking off of it. It's similar, but when you're looking at the different types of brands that you've worked with, what's the difference between the ones that are doing really, really well with influencer marketing and the ones that have done it for a while, but just are not getting those great results, that are struggling? What's the difference between them?
I'd say those brands are open, as I was mentioning before, to understanding that your typical content might not work on social media. Therefore, you want to be welcoming and embrace ideas from the content creator or the influencer, because they're the one that know exactly, right, what to do. Those brands also make it well. Those that have they created a community, not only a passive audience. There is another big difference. You can have an audience that usually is a passive, people that are just like usually watching your videos and that's about it. But creating a community, it is what you're going to have, loyalty also coming with that. So a community means people that maybe not only comment on your videos, but certain brands, they have maybe a Discord channel where they ask their people like, hey, this is the A/B testing of the thumbnail for our YouTube, new video. What do you think? You want to have those type of community and relationship with people. So, between understanding what works and what doesn't, thanks to listening to the influencer, having a conversation with their community, and then also consistency, right? These days, as I was saying before, it's a must have. You cannot think to do one campaign and put, some money 1 month and then hoping that is going to bring your results up for the end of the year. And to be consistent and all the time doing a sort of optimization loop. So as I was saying before, out of, let's say, 10 influencers that work on a campaign, look at the data. Look at the 3 that works, the best. If those 3, they work well also in the next campaign, they might become your ambassador for the year. So you can actually lock in them with a price that might be a good one. Imagine especially if they grow during the year, similar to sports people, athletes, whatever, you can lock them in for 1-year contract. They're going to be so passionate about your brand. You're going to not have to spend all the time to find new people. And those influencers are going to help you to bring you to the right people that might be seeing the same message about your brand 5 times, 10 times. And that helps you to bring from a viewer to a customer. So these are a few things that as a brand, you should start, right away to do.
And another kind of comparison here, how do you feel about the balance between working with really big influencers versus working with micro influencers? What does the ideal balance look like for most people?
Yeah, absolutely. So, in the years, again, being in this industry for almost 10 years, and every year I look at, it's funny to me that all the time it is micro and nano, they're the next big thing. Yes and no, in my opinion, because the thing is that with nano and micro, absolutely will usually have a better engagement. They might have stronger community. They might have this relationship with their following that if they say something, they do it, So they're you might have a smaller numbers, but better engagement and more conversion potentially. But people sometimes, they don't think about how time consuming that is. Because in order to get enough traction, you need maybe 50 micro or nano, right? So don't get me wrong, it's absolutely a good one, but take in consideration not only the spending, but also the time to communicate with 50 people to 100 people. It's a lot of back and forth. It's a lot of what about the scope of work? Send me again the deliverables. So what we usually do, we recommend to use a bit of a mix all the time, because first of all, you don't want to put all your eggs in one basket with a big one, Sometimes there are still brands, we want to work with this because they have whatever, 50 million followers, yeah, but look at many other factors. What is the historical data of their previous collaborations? Are they able to bring you clicks and customers, So many times there is this myth still, oh, it's a big one, I want to work with them. Or there's the myth no, only micro works well, but you don't think about all the implication about the time and the cost of it. So we as an agency all the time, we try to package in a way where you have a bit of nano, a bit of micro, a bit of medium, a bit of macro. And if the clients really want some celebrities, doing that, you're able to understand exactly how you should from the next times really spread your budget. Up until you don't test different ones, you don't know. So, you shouldn't be biased towards like influencers and be like, oh, I will go with influencers that are micro because I know they're going to work out. No, no, no. You don't know anything up until you don't test something. So test them out on different sizes. And only once you have data, so data should talk and not just your guts. Once you have the data, you'll be like, okay, we notice that these are the personas usually work well. And next time I'm going to maybe double down on that, but only once you have the data to back you up.
Yeah, that makes sense. And I want to pivot here before we run out of time here to live stream shopping. So,
Yeah.
this is something we've absolutely not covered on the podcast at this point. So I'm excited to dive into it a little bit here. First off, can you just describe what live stream shopping looks like, where you usually see this happening, and also dive into what's exciting about it? Why is this a viable strategy?
Absolutely. If you're interested in live stream shopping, you should look at anything that is happening in China, Indonesia. Many times we talk about China. People forget that Indonesia is the fourth largest country by population. Okay. So whenever there are like tests for social media, Indonesia is an interesting one to look at. And of course, China. So basically what happened is that you might also see like, videos of these days, especially in China, a lot of young people with their camera and they're like a stick and basically just being in a big room and 20 people at the same time talking in front of a camera to sell basically items. And that is the simple concept. How I can explain that, right? So basically it's you, usually a solo person in front of a camera, recording live. And then during that moment, you are telling people to buy certain things. And the good thing of live streaming is that it's a bilateral communication. You can show items, but people can ask you about, things. So therefore, like if you're selling shoes, they might ask you, can I see another model? Can I see that in a different color? If it's like, whatever item, you can interact. And that's why it is so cool because it's not just QVC. There is a unilateral conversation between a host and someone that is listening. In this way, you can tell, this is what is happening. Let me show it to you. And there is also like, especially on TikTok Shop these days, with one click of a button, you can go from watching something, I put it in the cart, and I purchase it. So it's a very frictionless type of purchase journey.
Yeah, and I like it. No, we really have not covered that at all. Is there anything besides live streaming when you're looking across the blend between creator economy, influencer marketing, these things? Any other trends that are kind of exciting to you right now that you're seeing?
I think that potentially when looking back now, I think that the original content is getting back. We have been a few years of a Mr. Beastification of everything, right? Everyone wanted to be the new Mr. Beast. All the content had to be in his style, like going with a certain very, very fast paced, cuts of videos. Everything has to be like majestic, right? $1 car versus $50 million cars, right? And everyone was kind of copying each other's. I think that we got this sort of box where a lot of content creators were in and they stopped making content that they loved just to follow other content because it was going popular. I think that finally that era is kind of finishing. And I think also about like TikTok pulling music out. You have to be inventing things now. You cannot just lip syncing or dancing or just jumping on a challenge, right? So I think that these days creators and influencers have to go back more into find their own personality, creating content also because there is a lot of content fatigue. People are kind of bored by the same content over and over. They want to see new things. So I think that overall in the creator economy, I think that content is going to be finally more original. And that is going to help to get even more ideas, especially with AI, that is not going to give you anything new, but it's just a repurpose of information already existing. I think that people want to see something new, something original.
Amazing. Well, thank you so much for your time here. Before we go, I do want to give you a chance to let people know where they can find you online and follow you and also what you're working on.
Absolutely. So LinkedIn, of course, I post there, a bunch of stuff. So if you look for my name, happy to connect over there. And I also host a podcast called The Influence Factor, where every Wednesday we have like fantastic guests from brand creators and people in the creator economy to talk about what is happening in the industry. And so, you can listen there. And then what I'm working on these days is primarily growing the agency. There is a lot of interest from brands to invest even more. And so we're looking now, not only, of course, we are in the US, but we also have people in Europe. We have a person in Dubai. We have people in Latin America. So we're expanding even more globally because it's very interesting to learn so much from other cultures because as in, in China, something is, far above, than us, compared to our markets here. You might learn something else from Latin America and other things. So my idea now is go even more global, maybe attacking some Asian markets, because again, you can learn so much and bring them, from those cultures then back to the US, back to Europe, and somehow, beat the competition and being one of the first inventing maybe something about the creator economy that is still new.